Well, that didn't take long. Everything has already changed for 2025 in terms of fantasy football, and free agency just got started. So, we're going to break down the major moves and tell you exactly what it means. Now, you can make an argument about which move was the biggest. I think the one that's got the most attention and possibly could be the biggest game changer is DK Metcalf getting his demand to trade to Pittsburgh. What happened to going somewhere warm? Look, this one is a little weird to me. I think a lot of people are confused by this. But Chris, let's talk brass tacks here. What does it actually mean for him? What does it mean for Pittsburgh? And of course, what does it mean for George Pickens now?
This can't be good, right? This can't be good. I mean, George Pickens was barely fantasy. I mean, George Pickens had some nice games last year, but he also had some complete duds. Now you're going to add DK Metcalf to the mix, who I kind of feel like does a lot of the same things that George Pickens already does. Not to mention, who's going to be the quarterback? It's definitely not going to be Justin Fields. We know this. Is it going to be Russ? Is it going to be Aaron Rodgers? Is it going to be somebody else? But I mean, I don't even know if it matters who the quarterback is really. How can this be good for either guy really to go to this situation? Yeah, I think we got to downgrade both these guys for fantasy. They'll be okay. Like, there will be some weeks where Pickens probably has a big game, some weeks where DK does. But I think most of the time they're just going to be kind of meh for fantasy.
Well, I mean, my very first thought, besides the fact DK must have really wanted out, or they really wanted him gone because, where he said he wanted to go, it's not where he went. This is not a great place because, like you said, we don't even know who the quarterback's going to be. But my thought really was these guys will not be able to coexist because they're kind of the same exact receiver, right? DK and George Pickens. And we heard a little bit of noise late during last season that maybe Pickens was going to be moved because Mike Tomlin not too happy with him. I really think that we're going to see a George Pickens trade happen at some point very soon, probably before the NFL draft. I think it's almost inevitable. Why would you bring in a guy like DK Metcalf if you have Pickens? Not saying they're exactly the same, but still, they are very similar in what they do. It just doesn't make sense here. So I do think Pickens is gone, but I still don't think this is good for DK's value because I don't know what quarterback is out there that's really going to be an upgrade over Geno Smith. I mean, look, if it's Aaron Rodgers, which is now the latest rumor, I don't know how low I'm putting DK on my board. What about you?
Yeah, you can't feel good. I mean, it's easy to look back last year at the end of the season and say, hey, look what Davante Adams did with Aaron Rodgers. But Aaron Rodgers was force feeding Davante Adams like 15 plus targets a game. That's not going to happen with DK Metcalf, especially if George Pickens is still there as well. So, yeah, if it's Aaron Rodgers, honestly, even if it's Russell Wilson, I know people are going to say, oh, they're reunited. Yeah, but this isn't prime Russ. It's a downgrade no matter what, in my opinion.
I think your prediction of what Aaron Rodgers should do and maybe will still do is just staying at home this season might be the best landing spot for him. All right, now Geno Smith is no longer Seahawk. You guys probably know this. He's a Raider, reunited with Pete Carroll. I thought it would be a different reunion. I thought it was going to be Russ to the Raiders, but instead it's Geno. This was surprising, mainly on the Seattle side. So, what does this mean for the Raiders? Does this make them at least, I don't know, but they're highly fantasy relevant, but fantasy sort of interesting now?
I mean, you got to feel good. You got to feel good about, not necessarily about the Raiders as far as like the Raiders. I'm not going to say they're like a contender to win the Super Bowl because they have Geno Smith, but you got to feel good for fantasy with guys like Jacoby Myers, Brock Bowers. I've been saying all offseason, not that it's been very long into the offseason here, but I've been saying Brock Bowers in the early second round feels too early for me. But now maybe, just maybe, there's a path for it making sense for him going this early with Geno Smith. And Jacoby Myers likely going to be in that JSN slot role. We saw last year, this is a great thing with Geno Smith. So we were worried about the quarterback situation for the Raiders, especially because they actually won some games down the stretch and weren't going to, have one of the top picks. But now that's been addressed. You got to feel good about both Jacoby Myers and Brock Bowers. And also, the Raiders have done nothing at wide receiver so far. It's not a good wide receiver class in the draft. I mean, who's left a free agent? Like Stephon Diggs coming off ACL. Sure, if they somehow ridiculously sign Keenan Allen, that might hurt Jacoby Myers. Amari Cooper, I mean, Jacoby Myers is probably going to be an absolute steal in fantasy drafts again this year.
Well, I'll say this. It's almost, I want to give this an incomplete grade because it really matters what they do at receiver. Look, with all the big name free agent receivers mostly off the board, they could still sign a veteran, but I don't think it's like any sort of a big splash coming. I got the feeling they're going to draft a wide receiver pretty early to help Geno. I don't know that this is an upgrade for Geno Smith in terms of fantasy because he really doesn't have a lot at receiver to throw to. And even if they do get maybe somebody like a Ted McMillan or a high end wide receiver in this draft class, that's not better than having JSN, DK Metcalf, and even Tyler Lockett for whatever you think of him. He's still a capable receiver. So I think this is a downgrade for Geno, especially with Pete Carroll as the head coach. Bowers, I think it's just neutral. I mean, he's being drafted, like you said, early second round already. I don't think his draft stock can really go much higher. If anything, he might get overdrafted this year. And then Jacoby Myers, this has to be a win, but this still really depends what else they do at receiver. All right, now Seattle has created this huge domino effect, as we already see, and we have to look at the Seahawks themselves. What's left there? Because Tyler Lockett got released, DK Metcalf is gone, Geno Smith is gone, JSN is the last man standing in that wide receiver room, and now he's got Sam Darnold throwing to him. What does that mean?
This has to be fantastic for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Again, what is really left at wide receiver that the Seahawks could do that would, take a huge chunk out of JSN's target share? And we saw Sam Darnold. Look, whatever you think of Sam Darnold under the bright lights when the game matters, sure, maybe he can't get it done. But for fantasy purposes, he got it done last year with both Jefferson and Addison. I mean, JSN is going to get so many targets in this offense. Now, I know they want to be a run-heavy offense, but they still have to throw the football. And it's just JSN right now. I mean, Jake Bobo, people are really talking themselves into Jake Bobo in Dynasty right now. I'm sure they'll do something at wide receiver in the draft and maybe a free agent wide receiver. But again, who is even left here? We're talking like 30-plus-year-old Stephon Diggs coming off ACL. There's no reason to sign Keenan Allen. Plus, he doesn't want to go to Seattle. He wants to go to a warm weather. He already said that. I just think this has to be huge for JSN. Maybe not as good for Sam Darnold, of course, going from Kevin O'Connell to Mike McDonald and this run-heavy offense, but it's got to be great for JSN.
Yeah, they almost have to draft a wide receiver because now they've got more draft picks to play with. They've already, kind of decided you're the guy, right? Jason, you are the present in the future at wide receiver. They need something else. This is obviously a forward-looking move, meaning they're not going to contend this year. I mean, I don't know why they wanted to blow it up, but whatever. They're going to draft a receiver, but JSN target share is going to go through the roof, so this is great for him. I think this is definitely a downgrade for Sam Darnold because besides the fact he doesn't have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison to throw to, and a pretty good tight end in TJ Hawkinson, he's also not in that pass-friendly Kevin O'Connell offense, and he's on a team that, you nailed it, wants to run the ball. So I really think the big winner here is Kenneth Walker, maybe Zach Charbonnet, but that's also assuming that they can play at least in game neutral or, possibly game positive game scripts going forward with Sam Darnold at quarterback. But yeah, Darnold is definitely not somebody I'm drafting this year. So what about Minnesota now? Darnold is out. That means JJ McCarthy is going to be the guy, probably. And that might matter because we have to really hope that Justin Jefferson is still going to be an elite receiver, whether it's him or Daniel Jones or somebody else. Could it be somebody else? Are you now high on JJ McCarthy?
I think you have to be. I mean, who else could it really be? I don't think it's going to be an Aaron Rodgers or a Russell Wilson type. I just don't think that's what the Vikings are going to plan. I think they're, at this point, yeah, maybe they'll bring Daniel Jones back to compete with J.J. McCarthy if that's what it comes to. But I really think if J.J. McCarthy is healthy next year, he's going to get a first crack to be the guy. And look, coming out of the draft last year, I like J.J. McCarthy as a prospect. I'm not worried about Justin Jefferson. I mean, really, unless it's Daniel Jones starting week one, I'm not worried about Justin Jefferson. As long as the quarterback throwing to him is at least an average QB, which I think J.J. McCarthy can be, Jefferson's going to be just fine. And I think Addison will be fine too, because like you said, this is the Kevin O'Connell pass-happy offense. He just knows how to get guys open. He knows how to get his best players involved. So I think if it's McCarthy, it's totally fine for this offense.
Agree. I'm going to take McCarthy over Darnold every time in those early best ball drafts. We're doing underdog this whole time. I'm going to take McCarthy over and over. Now, I don't expect him to become a superstar necessarily in year one as a starter, but the only thing that will probably keep him out as the starter at QB is if he's for some reason not fully healthy. He should be fine. They didn't draft him that high to have him sit on the bench and watch a guy like Aaron Rodgers, right? That just does not make sense. Jefferson is still a first rounder. I think it doesn't matter what quarterback throws to him. We've seen that. So the only thing is I might right now put like CD Lamb ahead of Justin Jefferson, what, number 5, number 6? Big difference. Jefferson will be fine. I think Addison will be fine. So I think everything's pretty similar to where I valued these guys before free agency. All right, moving away from the 6 degrees of Seattle Seahawks separation here, but we're still on the West Coast. The Rams are shaking things up. Not at quarterback, though. Matt Stafford stayed after some talk he might be shipped off or somewhere else. But Davante Adams is there now, and Cooper Kupp, well, we don't know where he's going to go, but we know it's not going to be with the Rams. They've already made that pretty clear. So how does this make you feel just all around with that offense, and what does this mean for a guy like Puka?
Well, Puka's the big question here. I'll first start by saying Matthew Stafford has been criminally maybe the most undervalued player in all of best ball drafts so far. I mean, I routinely can get Matthew Stafford as like QB 30 or QB 29. It's absurd. And now he's got Davante Adams, so I'm sure his ADP is going to go way up. This does make me a little nervous for Puka, though, because say what you want about Adams at this point of his career. I think Adams is going to be a better version of Cooper Kupp as a receiver. We saw last year in New York, he did play a lot out of the slot. I think that's going to be the Rams' plan for him. He's not the blocker that Cooper Kupp is, which, may limit him in this McVay offense a little bit. But as far as a pass catcher, he's just better than Cooper Kupp at this point of their careers. I mean, probably better than Cooper Kupp at any point of their careers, to be honest. And so, I mean, this is just a great weapon for Stafford, but I think that is going to affect Puka to some degree because last year Cooper Kupp was just non-existent, especially down the stretch. I still think Puka will be the number one guy. He's younger, he's a stud, but I think we have to knock him down a little bit because this is some legit competition for targets here. So I don't know. I've had Puka as a first rounder all offseason. Again, it hasn't been a long offseason, but I think now I'm not going to be too comfortable taking him in the first round with Adams there. And then I guess I didn't talk about Adams. I mean, it's got to be a great spot for Adams, right?
I can't think of too many better realistic spots for Davante Adams. He wanted to go on the West Coast. He got his wish. He's got a quarterback who is, I think, objectively, we can all agree, better than Aaron Rodgers at this point and better than, who was it? Aiden O'Connell, somebody else the Raiders had. It didn't matter. Okay, that was the main concern with Davante Adams last year was he was on the Raiders. He was stuck there, and then he got traded to the Jets. And, that wasn't necessarily a better situation, but he wound up getting force feed targets. Now, I don't think he's going to get as many targets as he got down the stretch with the Jets, but I don't think it's going to be that far off. We've seen Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua coexist and both feast in this passing game. I don't see why both guys can't do it again. And I'm not too worried about Puka because, with Stafford, he's kind of a chemistry guy. He'll go to the one he trusts. He clearly trusts Puka, so I might move him more to like the end of the first round, but I'm not too worried about this. They're still going to pass the ball plenty. Obviously, they have faith in Stafford. And Davante Adams, I mean, I think this has to be a positive for him. He's clearly far from done. So, I mean, I guess I'd have to say right now, maybe like a third round pick seems pretty fair to me. But one thing is pretty clear. They don't have any faith left in Cooper Kupp. So this might have been what kind of held Stafford back last year. So speaking of that, we as of right now don't know where Cooper Kupp's going to go, but the Rams have already said, like, look, you're not staying around here. Okay, he's going to get cut if he isn't traded. I thought he might land in a great situation like to the Texans or something. It doesn't seem like that's happening because they already got their guy. What do you even do with Kupp now? Is he a guy that you're too scared to draft?
He's getting there. He's definitely getting there for me. I mean, where could he realistically go at this point to where you would buy back into Cooper Kupp? Because again, we're talking about, a slot wide receiver who didn't look very good last year, who has to go to a team that has a significant need for a pass catcher, specifically who plays in the slot. I can't think of a lot of spots. I mean, maybe if he goes to the Jags to replace Christian Kirk, but even then, how good do we really feel? So, yeah, I can't say I'm all the way out on Kupp because he goes like pick 90 something, I think. So it's like, okay, if he goes anywhere halfway decent, I'll take a shot. But yeah, we honestly might be seeing the end of Cooper Kupp, not just in fantasy, but in real life.
Yeah, of all the teams, talk about coach, quarterback, and being loyal. The breakfast buddies. him and Stafford were breakfast buddies. This is why he had that record-breaking season and why he continued to be the focal point there, even though with Puka last year clearly was the better receiver. I mean, if they're done with him, then I think all other teams are going to definitely have to raise an eyebrow. And this is why they're not trading for him. So I almost would say it doesn't matter where it goes. I'm going to be pretty out on Cooper Kupp. I can't even think of a good spot for him. If it's somewhere like Jacksonville, then forget it. I will just ignore his name on draft day. All right, let's go back to a team that got their guy and improved. It's Washington. You broke down Deebo going to the Commanders, and then they re-signed Ertz, and they just got a big boost on offensive line as well, getting Laremy Tunsil. This is turning possibly into a juggernaut on offense, but do you think it might be overhyped going into the season?
It probably will be. I mean, I think it's got to be great for Jaden Daniels. Anytime you get, an upgraded offensive line and upgraded weapons, it's got to be good for you. Whatever you think of Deebo Samuel at this point in his career, he's better than whoever they had at number 2. Diami Brown, Noah Brown, whoever it was at number 2. I did talk about it on the video, so I won't go too deep into it, but I think we got to knock Terry McLaurin down a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit, because, again, Deebo is going to take more targets from Terry McLaurin than any of those other wide receivers. And I think it definitely hurts Zach Ertz, even though they brought him back, because I think Deebo is going to kind of take some of those, short, kind of check down, intermediate type of throws that we saw go to Ertz last year. So I think the big winner here is Jaden Daniels. Deebo Samuel, I know a lot of people are saying, like, oh, this is it. This could revive him. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know if it really changes my opinion on him too much. I just think the main things for me is Jaden Daniels up, Zach Ertz down, and Terry McLaurin slightly down.
Well, this is a tricky one. I'll say on paper is clearly good for Jaden Daniels, but that's the problem is that everybody sees this and everybody is going to look at that offense after last year and be probably a little too high. We have to set realistic expectations, and most people don't want to do that, right? They're going to say this is the best offense in the league now, or they're up there. Jaden Daniels is going to be great, but he's going to be drafted before I'm willing to take him. So even though he will be at least as good, if not better, he should be better next year. The ADP is going to be too rich for me. I already know this. And the same thing with Deebo. Again, why, after signing this big contract and not having major injury last year, did Deebo suffer in terms of his efficiency? And why were the 49ers so eager to get rid of him? And they didn't get a big haul back. So I'm pretty out on Deebo. Even though it's a great spot for him, I'm just not in on him anymore. I think Terry will probably be fine. Zach Ertz will be fine. Last year, I think the offense that was definitely overvalued was the Jets. We saw how that turned out. Some disappointments there. What is going to happen now? They have decided Justin Fields is the present. He's the quarterback. And so a guy like Garrett Wilson still there, and now Davante Adams gone. What do you do with Garrett Wilson?
Cannot feel good about Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson starting to feel like a guy that is just going to be a lot of hype and not a lot of substance as far as fantasy production goes. I think Garrett Wilson's a great player, but it's one of these guys, maybe kind of like Terry McLaurin, honestly, a guy that, like, it just feels like, can we ever get this guy in a good situation finally? Look, Fields is fine, and I know DJ Moore a couple years ago had a nice, season with Fields, but man, that feels like a minor miracle, especially after what we saw last year with Pickens. I think this is good for Fields for fantasy because he's going to be the guy, and we know what he can do with his legs. We know what that upside is, and for fantasy, that works. But for the rest of the offense, this isn't good. I think it's okay for Breece Hall because maybe his running ability will open up some lanes for Breece Hall. Maybe they will be a team that just, runs the ball a lot and leans on the defense as they should be. But, man, this got to be a big hit for Garrett Wilson. Do not feel good about him at all.
Yeah, I'm hoping that his ADP settles to a range where I'm still comfortable taking him. But like you said, I'm looking at like a Terry pre-Jaden Daniels kind of, feel here. He'll have his moments, but I mean, this is just a weird spot for Fields. I've got to think and I've got to hope that this remains more of a run heavy offense. I'm willing to take a chance on Brees still because I think his ADP will be reasonable. Garrett Wilson, I just feel bad for him. Honestly, I just feel bad for him. I don't even think Justin Fields is a bad quarterback, but for fantasy purposes, it's not going to give him a huge season. So I don't think we can expect great things from Fields in terms of fantasy again. And same thing with Garrett Wilson. Now, what about the running backs? Well, unlike last year, not a lot of big name free agents, but the biggest moves here possibly happening for the Chargers and the Cowboys. That's right, the Cowboys finally actually did something. But in LA, we got now Najee Harris taking over at running back. Gus Edwards is gone. What does this mean for Najee? Is this a good fit? And what does this mean for J.K. Dobbins?
I think you got to feel good about Najee Harris. Look, Najee Harris was good last year. I mean, like, Najee Harris is not one of the best running backs in the NFL. He's not going to be one of the best running backs in fantasy, but he was good last year. And now he's going to a team, a better offensive line, a better running game, so you got to feel pretty good about him. You got to think the Chargers are moving on from J.K. Dobbins now. Remember, they signed him to that one-year deal last year. Gus Edwards gone. Last year it was the reunion of the Ravens. Now you got to think they're both going to be gone. So we'll see where J.K. Dobbins ends up. But assuming that they don't also bring him back, which I guess is possible, you got to feel pretty good about Najee Harris here. We know if nothing else, he's durable. He can be a workhorse, and he's probably going to be the workhorse for the Chargers, which definitely has fantasy value.
Yeah, I think this is great for Najee. I'm not expecting a monster season, but I think he can definitely do better than when he at any time was with the Steelers. This is a team that, number one, will commit to the run. We know this. And number two, they will have a better offensive line than Pittsburgh has had the last couple of years. And they're going to get somebody, right? Pass catching back, third down. Every team has a backup running back. But I think Najee is going to be pretty much a workhorse. So I see his draft stock going up. I'm not going crazy, right? I don't want him as my RB1 necessarily, unless I'm doing like a zero RB build. But yeah, I think he's a huge winner here. And then how about them Cowboys? I guess they decided their RB1 is not in the draft. Sorry, Ashton Javonte probably not happening because they signed Javonte Williams. Is this a dream spot for Javonte?
It's a dream spot, but I don't know if it even matters. He was so bad last year. I mean, you just got to wonder. And I don't think this necessarily means the Cowboys aren't drafting a running back. Okay, maybe they're not going to get Ashton Genty, but there's plenty of good running backs in this class. It wouldn't surprise me if they draft somebody and Javonte isn't the guy day one. I mean, if somehow he survives the draft, then okay, maybe I have to sort of buy in on Javonte Williams. But man, he was so bad last year. And this isn't the Cowboys from like 4 or 5 years ago with one of the best offensive lines in football either. So yeah, I don't think I can do it even in Dallas.
Just count me out here. To me, this just reaffirms that the Cowboys just really don't care that much about the running back position. Like maybe Javonte still has something left, and maybe it'll be better than it was in Denver because at least he'll be the guy mostly. But like you said, this offensive line, not that great. Zach Martin now is retired. What are they really going to do to inspire you to get the Dallas Cowboys running back? And we got a brand new head coach here. I don't know. This seems like a disaster in waiting. So, some people will probably overreact and think this is perfect. Well, go ahead. Perfect for you, not for me. This is just the beginning. Still plenty of moves to break down, a lot more left. And we're going to do that this entire week with reaction and, of course, what matters for fantasy for next year. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now and turn on notifications so you know as soon as a video drops.